Okay, we are now starting session number 2. A number of years ago, Michael Motion came here, and he gave a performance that I thought was astonishing. I don't know if he remembers the story. And he did his stuff, and he ended with a little tape. And a tape doesn't have any of the personality of a live thing. If he had ended, juggling one golf ball at that point, we were so into him at that moment, he would have gotten a standing ovation for sure. I know when people are going to get a standing ovation. I know how to work the audience. I see people work the audience. I know what you have to do. You just have to be against something and everybody stands up. And I asked him, he showed a little tape at the end, I said, Michael, yeah? Why? Oh, you're talking there. Okay. Madonna and Child there. You can put it down. I asked Michael, why didn't he end with a live? He said, because I said, you would have gotten a standing ovation. And basically, this fucking genius Zen Buddha said, I know. It's a kind of restraint that few of us have. Michael Motion.
Howdy. Thanks for coming in here and not seeing me on television or whatever. I'm a juggler. And I started juggling a long time ago, but long before that I was a golfer. And that's what I was, a golfer. And as a golfer and as a kid, one of the things that really sort of seeped into my pores that I sort of lived my whole life is process. And it's the process of learning things. One of the great things was my father was an avid golfer, but he was a lefty. And he had a real passion for golf, and he also created this whole mythology about Ben Hogan and various things. Well, I learned a lot about interesting things that I knew nothing about at the time, but grew to know stuff about. And that was the mythology of skill. And so one of the things that I love to do is to explore skill. And since Richard put me on this whole thing with music, I'm supposed to actually be doing a project with Todd Mackover with the MIT Media Lab that relates a lot to music. But Todd couldn't come, and the project is sort of somewhere. I'm not sure whether it's happening the way we thought or not. But I'm going to explore skill and juggling and basically visual music, I guess. Okay, you can start the music. Thanks. Now, juggling can be a lot of fun. Play with skill, and play with space, play with rhythm. You can turn the mic on now. I'm going to do a couple of pieces I do a big piece in a triangle, and these are 3 sections from it. Part of the challenge was to try to understand rhythm and space using not just my hands, because a lot of juggling is hand-oriented, but using the rhythm of my body and feet and controlling the balls with my feet. Now this next section was an attempt to explore space. See, I think Richard said something about people that are against something. Well, a lot of people think jugglers defy gravity or do stuff. Well, I kind of, from my childhood and golf and all that, it's a process of joining with forces. And so what I like to do is try to figure out how to join with the space through the technique. So juggling, gravity, up, down. Well, if you figure out what up and down really are, now it's a complex physical set of skills to be able to throw a ball down, up, and everything. But then you add in sideways. Now, I look at it somewhat as a way, when you learn juggling, what you learn is how to feel with your eyes and see with your hands. Because you're not looking at your hands, you're looking at where the balls are, or you're looking at the audience. So this next part is really a way of understanding space and rhythm with the obvious reference to the feet, but it's also time, where the feet were, where the balls were. So visual music, rhythm, and complexity. I'm going to build towards complexity now. Juggling 3 balls is simple and normal. Well, excuse me. For jugglers, okay? And remember, you're transposing, you're getting into a subculture here. And juggling, the balls cross and all that. Okay, if you keep them in their assigned paths, you got parallel lines of different heights, but in a hopefully even rhythm. Then you can change the rhythm. Whoa, good, Michael. You can change the rhythm if you get out of the lights. Okay, change the rhythm so it's even. Or you can go back and change the height. Now, skill. Well, but you're boxed in if you can only do it up and down that way. So you got to go after the space down there. Okay, then you're going to combine them, because then you have the whole spatial palette in front of you. And then you get crazy. Now, I'm actually going to ask you to try something, so you got to pay attention. Complexity. If you spend enough time doing something, time slows down, or your skill increases, so your perceptions change. It's learning skills like being in a high-speed car crash. Things slow down as you learn, as you learn, as you learn. You may not be able to affect it. It almost drifts on you and goes. But that's the closest approximation I can have to it. So, complexity. Now, how many here are jugglers? Okay, so most of you are going to have a similar reaction to this. Okay? And whoever laughed there had to say, what do you hear? Yeah. You understood it completely, right? No. It looks like a mess. It looks like a mess with a guy there who's got his hands around that mess. Okay? Well, that's what juggling is about, right? Is being able to do something that other people can't do or can't understand. All right, so that's one way of doing it, which is 5 balls down. Okay? Another way is the outside. And you can play with the rhythm. Same pattern. Make it faster and smaller. Make it wider. Make it narrower. Bring it back up. Okay, go. Thanks. Now, what I wanted to get to is that you're all very bright, very tactile. I have no idea how computer-oriented or three-dimensionally oriented you are, but let's try something. Okay, so since you all don't understand what the 5-ball pattern is, I'm going to give you a little clue. Enough of a clue? So you get the pattern, right? Okay. No, it's not, you're not getting off that easy. All right? Now, do me a favor. Follow the ball that I ask you to follow. Green. Yellow. Pink. White. Okay. You can do that? Yeah? Okay. Now let's actually learn something. Or actually, let me put you in that area of learning, which is very insecure. You want to do it? Yeah? Okay. Hands out in front of you. Palms up. Together. What you're going to learn is this. Okay? So what I want you to do, just listen to me and do it. Index finger, middle finger, ring, little. Little, ring, middle, index. And then open. Finger, 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 finger. A little bit faster. Finger, 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 finger. Finger, 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 finger. All right. A lot of different learning processes going on in here. One learning process that I see is this. Okay? Another learning process that I see is this. Okay? So everybody take a breath in, breath out. Okay, now, one more time. And finger, 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 finger. Open, finger, 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 finger. Okay, shake your hands up. Now, I assume a lot of you spend a lot of time at a computer, okay? So what you're doing is you're going la la la, and you're getting this, okay? So that's exactly what I'm going to ask you to do, but in a slightly different way. You got to combine it. So what I want you to do is fingers. I'll tell you what to do with your fingers, same thing. But what I want you to do is also with your eyes follow the colored ball that I ask you to follow. Okay? Here we go. So we're going to start off looking at the white ball, and I'm going to tell you which color, and I'm also going to tell you to go with your fingers, okay? So, white ball, and finger, 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 finger. Pink. Finger, 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 finger. Green. Finger, 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 finger. Yellow. Finger, 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 pinker, finger. Finger, 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 finger. All right. How'd you do? Well, okay. The reason I wanted you to do that is because that's actually what most people face throughout their lives. A moment of learning, a moment of challenge. It's a moment that you can't make sense of. Why the hell should I learn this? Okay? Does it really have anything to do with anything in my life? You know, I can't decipher, is it fun? Is it challenging? Am I supposed to cheat? You know, what are you supposed to do? You got somebody up here who's the operative principle of doing that for his whole life, okay? Trying to figure that stuff out. But is it going to get you anywhere? It's just a moment. That's all it is, a moment, okay? I'm going to change the script for 1 second. Just let me do this. I don't need music for it. Talking about time in a moment. There's a piece that I recently developed which was all about that, a moment. And what I do as a creative artist is I develop vocabularies or languages of moving objects. What I've done for you here, I developed a lot of those tricks, whatever, and I put the choreography together, but they're not original techniques. Now I'm going to start showing you some original techniques that come from the work that I've developed, okay? So a moment. How would you define a moment? Well, as a juggler, what I wanted to do was create something that was representational of a moment. I'll use that in a minute. All right, I'm going to get on my knees and do it. So, a moment. Okay? Then what I did as a juggler was say, okay, what can I do to make that something that is dependent on something else, another dynamic? So, a moment. Another moment. Oh, excuse me, it's a little sweaty in here. A moment that travels. A moment, let me try that again. It separates and comes back together. Time. How can you look at time? And what are you dedicated to in exploring a particular thing? Well, obviously, there's something in here, and you can all have a guess as to what it is. There's a mystery. There's a mystery in the moment, and it has to settle. And then it's dependent on something else. And then it comes to rest. Just a little thing about time. Now, this is expanded into a much bigger piece where I use ramps of different parabolas that I roll the balls on while I'm keeping time with this. But I just thought I'd talk about a moment. All right. Okay. Can we show the video of the triangle? Are we ready to do that? Yes? This is the piece that I told you about. It's a much bigger piece that I do exploring the space of a geometric triangle. Go right ahead anytime. The only thing I'll say about the last session is, if you ever tried juggling and driving the car with your knees at 120 miles an hour? The only other thing is it was a real shock. I always drove motorcycles, and when I bought my first car, it shocked me that it cost 3 times more than my parents' house. Interesting. Anyway, balance. Constant movement to find an approach to stillness. Cheating. Balance. It's making up the rules so you can't cheat. So you learn. To approach stillness with different parts of your body. To have a conversation with it. To speak. To listen. Whoop. Now, it's dependent on rhythm and keeping the center of balance when it falls, going underneath it. So there's a rhythm to it. The rhythm can't get much smaller. As your skill increases, you learn to find those tinier spaces, those tinier movements. Thanks. Now I'm going to show you the beginnings of a piece that is about balance in some ways, and also, actually, if you're bored, not here, here's one use for it. You can go with the Styx One music. That has a certain kind of balance to it, which is all about plumb. I apprenticed as a carpenter's assistant. I apprenticed to a carpenter and learned about plumb, square, and level. And they influenced that and this next piece, which I'll do a little segment of. 2 sticks, you can go with it. Thanks. Which is, again, exploring space and the lines in space. And the lines in space in a different way. Oh, let's see here. So, I'll come back to that in a second, but working with one ball. Now, what if you attach something to it or change it? This is just a little thing that I made because I really like the idea of curves and balls together. And then creating space and the rhythm of space using the surface of the balls, surface of the arms. Just a little toy. Which leads me to the next thing, which is, what do I got here? Okay. All right. I'm actually leading up to something, the newest thing that I'm working on. This is not it. This is exploring geometry and the rhythm of shape. Now, what I just did was I worked with the mathematics, the diameter and the circumference. Sometimes pieces are mathematical in that way, that I look at a shape and say, what about if I use this and this and this? Sometimes life, what happens in life, affects my choice of objects that I try to work with. The next piece that I'm going to do, which is the cylinders piece, if you want to get that up, it has to do with cylinder seals from about 5,000 years ago, which were stone with designs that were used to roll over wet clay, with all sorts of great designs. I love ceramics and all of that. It's a combination of that, the beauty of that, the shape, and the stories that were involved in it, as well as the fact that they protected the contents. The second influence on this piece came from recycling, and looking into a tin can recycling bin and seeing all that beautiful emptiness. So, if you want to go with the music for cylinders.
down now. Couple of minutes? Just don't end on a video.
What?
Just don't end
No
on a
more,
video.
no more video.
Okay.
Okay, no more video. All right. I love that piece. It's a lot of fun. Thanks. Two last things, and I'll do them live. Talking about geometry and everything. If you take the circle and you split it in half, can you run S-curve music? I'm going to do just a short version of it.
Just put it in my closet.
Circle split in half and rotated. And mythology. Anyway, that piece also has a kinetic sculpture in the middle of it. I dance around. Small stage, so. 2 minutes just to end. Mm-hmm. The latest piece that I'm working on, what I love is that I never know what I'm working on, why I'm working on it. They're not ideas, they're instincts. And the latest thing that I'm working on is something really, I don't know what it is yet. And that's good. I like not to know for as long as possible. Well, because then it tells me the truth, instead of me imposing the truth. And what it is working with both positive, negative space, but also with these curves. And what it involves, and I don't know if my hands are too beaten up to do it or not, but I'll do a little bit of it. It initially started off with me stacking these things, bunches of them, and then playing with the sense of space, of filling in the space. And then it started changing and become folding on themselves, and then changing levels. Because my attempt is to make visual instruments, not to just make, now I'll try one other thing. To work in 3 dimensions with your perceptions of space and time. Now, I don't know exactly where it's going, but I've got a bit of effort involved in this thing, and it's going to change as I go through it, but I really like it. Feels right. This may not be the right shape, and I have, look at this shape, and then I'll show you the first design I ever put to it. Just to see, just to play, because I love all different kinds of things to play with. Let's see here. To work with the positive and negative in a different way. And to change, and to change. So I'm off on my new direction with this to explore rhythm and space. We'll see what I come up with. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, like say, come
Richard
up.
said to me, design of music. I'd never really thought of the word design and the word music together before, but then realized that traditionally music is very much about design. It's all mathematics, pitches on the scale, pulses of rhythm that are subdivided, and so on. But what's really been interesting design-wise in music in the last decade has been what new technology has made possible, and new ways to perceive music, new ways to create it and recreate it, and new ways that it comes to us as listeners. So I recommended to Richard 3 different examples of music that you wouldn't have encountered before, and one of them was actually Richard's idea. As soon as we started talking about it, he said, hey, how about this? So you'll find out what that is a little bit later on. So do you want to introduce Mark?
Mark isn't next. We're going to have Gary. We're going to have but Mark isn't next. No.
Yeah, Mark.
No, David Mash is next.
Well, according to...
yeah, but don't look at that.
Oh.
I have it here.
Okay.
That's only a guide.
Okay, well then Dave Mash is next. And
Dave Mash is next,
And this
yeah.
was your idea.
Yes, well, okay. David Mash.
Last spring, early summer, and we talked about what I might do tonight, talk about the design of music, and of course my personal involvement has been with a lot of the technology and how we use technology to make music, and at Berklee College of Music how we use it to teach music and to learn music. So we got to talking, and Richard came up with this idea that maybe rather than just talk about the music, maybe I would actually create some pieces of music for the conference. How many of you noticed the music that we walked into, this set? Okay. Thank you. Richard has chosen over the years the music to walk into each session and the music to leave from each session very carefully. And the music that we, actually I'm up there now. The entrance music that we usually walk into is the Triumphal March from the Verdi opera Aida. And we started talking about the design of this and how it fit in the conference, and we thought, wouldn't it be cool to kind of do an exploration of this music and then kind of use the technology to decompose it, recompose it, rearrange it, and in the course of that talk about the process of the design and how we use the tools of technology to design music. So the very first session for the car, we walked into the original version of Aida. And this time we started with the first of 11 different variations that we'll have for each session. So it's your job now to listen carefully and notice the different versions. Try to explore different styles, different forms of music. And what I thought I would do is just talk a little bit about what that process is from a musician's perspective, how we think about this. As Richard noted, Gary has been doing for a number of years now, talks about how he thinks about music and the improvisational aspects. And we talk about the basic elements that go into music, melody, harmony, and rhythm. But I wanted to talk a little bit higher level, that is at the more design level, the overall architecture of music level, and talk about form and style and how we use that to make these different pieces for this conference. It's always hard to follow a juggler, But actually, Michael made some really great points about time and space. And I always think about music as being, kind of the least tangible art forms because it only exists in time. So he got to work with time and space and to work with rhythm and how the space could change the rhythm and time, etc. But in music, without some kind of live aspect of performance, and I don't just mean performing on instruments, but some other kind of activity, we're really only dealing with time. I often think about, well, just imagine that this was a great piece of sculpture. It exists in space, and it's frozen there. And if I turn my back on it and I look back at it, it's still there. But that's not true with music. With music, if you stop listening, or don't pay attention, or if you leave the room and you come back, it's gone. It's over. So in the design of music, we, as musicians, work on things that kind of bring tangibility and add form to the sound in time. And one of the things we do is we repeat. We have repetition in music. So just talking about Aida and the Triumphal March, which I've heard so many times over the last few months, I can't tell you. You know, Gloria, I know how you put up with Richard, and you should talk to my wife sometime about the number of times that she's heard this theme in a variety of overdub situations and repeating and repeating. But anyways, musically, we use repetition to help create form. So, for instance, we have the first phrase, which in this case kind of asks a question. And I'm hoping we're going to have sound. So that phrase kind of ends on ba-ba-da, and you want it to go on. So we have a next phrase, which is a repetition of that phrase, which kind of concludes the sentence. We have kind of an antecedent consequent idea. So now you've started to remember this because we've played it a couple times. The next thing we do is we put it into context, kind of into a space, but into a mental space, by contrasting it with something else. And then, just so that you don't forget it, we repeat it again. And actually, I'm going to click on the... And it didn't play. Come on, play one more time. Well, you get the idea. And technology is a wonderful thing when it works. And so we have this form that we get called AABA, which is a kind of a standard form. Millions of songs, hit songs, have been created using this form because it works so well. It establishes an idea in space, in our kind of mental space, and then puts it in context and wraps it up for us. So then on this project we started to think about style and genre, and what makes a piece of music sound like a specific style. One thing is instrumentation. So for instance, if you think about a Dixieland jazz piece, and you think about the instrumentation that makes it sound like Dixieland jazz. You have like a clarinet playing the melody, you have trombone doing, kind of counterpoint with it, you have the bass parts being played on a tuba, you have banjo strumming. Now if you just imagine that in your mind for a moment, and then think about what that would be like with different instruments. Let's say like an electric guitar playing the melody, and the banjo part being played by organ, and maybe we have, instead of trombone, we have harmonica. The genre, the style changes completely. Also in the style is the rhythmic interplay between what the different instruments are doing. So what the bass part is doing versus what the drum part is doing, and the way that they interrelate helps to make up the style. And then lastly, the tempo. So that sometimes if we have all things equal and we just change the tempo, we can create a different style. For instance, samba is a kind of a fast bossa nova. Especially in the dance forms, we see this a lot. So new styles get created by taking elements from one style and juxtaposing them with another style. So you take the bass part from a reggae piece, and you take the drum part from a funk piece, and you get some new musical style. And these things can be fairly well known, so well known that the computer actually can be programmed to do them for us. So we have a very inexpensive, I'm not having good luck here with this. We have a very inexpensive computer program called, interestingly enough, Band in a Box. Lives inside my computer. It's a little band I can carry around with me. And basically what I've done here is I've just entered the melody and the harmony and the rhythm, the basic elements, into the program. And this is the music to the Aida Triumphal March. And then we can choose style and tempo and key, and we can vary that independently of one another. So this version that I have right up on the screen now, you'll notice that in this box it says Bossa Nova. So now what we'll do is we'll listen to the Triumphal March in a Bossa Nova feel. Now, if you listen to what the bass is playing dun, 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 that rhythm, right? Listen what the drum is playing. It's kind of a stand straight. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to click on my magic menu here and say, let's choose a different style. How about jazz swing? Now, the first thing that the program is smart enough to know, and by the way, this is a program cost under $80, it's smart enough to say, is it okay to change the melody to a swing feel? Well, it knows that in the swing feel...
Okay to change melody to swing feel.
Yes, it is. So before I do this, though, if you look just behind this dialog box, you'll see the melody there, and you'll notice that if you know how to read music at all, we have a quarter note on the D, and then the C that's a dotted eighth and followed by a 16th. This kind of very stiff kind of rhythmic feel. When I do this, it immediately changes these things to triplets, kind of. And that helps to change the feel. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crank up the tempo a little bit, and I'm going to go here and just tell it to do a little different variation of this style, because it often is lame. That's one of those musical terms, lame. So now listen to what the bass player is doing. Instead of that pattern it was doing before, now it's playing steady quarter notes. And what's the drummer doing? Instead of that steady pattern it was doing, it's playing... Right? So we got a swing feel happening. Lame swing feel, but... So you get the idea that we can, by changing the various interplay rhythmically, we can begin to change the style. I'm going to say no to this and come back to this. And now talk about some of the tools. So this was a tool that I used, like I said, a $79 piece of software called Band in the Box. Now I didn't use that to actually produce the music because it's kind of a stiff mechanical feel and not all that musical. But I did do it just to kind of spark some ideas and make me think, because I was having a hard time. I mean, I left, Richard always likes us to tell a personal story. Well, part of my life I spend at Berklee College of Music, where I'm Vice President for Information Technology. And I have a managerial style that dictates a certain behavior, which is when I go to a meeting, my job is to leave the meeting with nothing on my to-do list. So I went to this meeting in Richard's house with Gary. And somehow I left this meeting with 22 pieces on my to-do list. So I had a lot of thinking to do, and I said, I don't know what to do with this. And I thought about all the various approaches I could do. So I chose this Band in the Box approach to just kind of stimulate my creativity. And that's one of the things that the technology can do is just, when you're dry for ideas, it can suggest things. And then you can say, no, I don't like any of that, but now I have some ideas. And so these intelligent accompanists have some value. They're really good for educational uses. It's great for students to practice too. That is, if you want to practice soloing over some changes, you can set the style, set the tempo, set the key, play along. And then you can change the key, change the tempo, etc., until you've mastered this skill. Kind of as Michael must do with his juggling. He must spend hours practicing it different ways. Well, we as musicians do the same thing. The question is, if I click on this, will it actually work? It's been one of those nights. The tool that I use most it's called a music sequencer. And the reason it's called a sequencer is because everything I do as a musician can be thought of as an event in time. So if I play a note, I let the note up. I just did two events. I played a note, I stopped playing a note. And what a music sequencer does is keep track of everything that I do physically, all the physical movements I make, in the sequence in which I perform them. And so we have this software. Oh, unbelievable. It worked that time. This is a piece of software from a German company called eMagic. The software is called Logic. I'm talking like this because it takes a while to load. And basically what this software does is it allows me to play music into the computer and hear it back in the order that I played it with, and then do things to it to change it. So this was, just going to turn this up a little bit. So this is the main tool that I use for creating music, and it's one that many musicians use. It's probably the most commonly used tool that musicians use for composing. And I think about this in the prehistoric days before MIDI, the Musical Instrument Digital Interface, which was born in 1983. So prehistoric being 1982 and before. The way that musicians worked was we would hear the sound in our head, and then we would write it down on paper, and then we would copy that out and give it to musicians to play. And basically what we were doing as composers or arrangers in our design of the music was basically writing instructions for somebody else to make our creation be heard. A very kind of unsatisfying way of working. What this software does is it lets me have it start recording. It gives me a click track, and then I can just start to play. And when I'm finished playing, it'll play it back for me. So I can hear my music kind of in a very tangible way in the sound. I'm just going to undo a couple of cables here which are making noise and distracting me. So basically, I'm going to show you kind of how I went about making these pieces of music. So I'm going to start by clicking the record button. It's going to give me a 4-bar count off, and I'm just going to play a 4-bar phrase, which I'm going to eventually turn into something to do with the Triumphal March from Aida. So it now plays that back for me, including the mistakes I made. And if I double-click this, you can see the notes that I played. And you can see the note I played wrong, and I'm just going to delete it. And you see why I use this tool a lot. So now I'm going to add a bass part. It just keeps playing it back. Maybe some drums. Maybe a little pad. You get the idea. So, and you can do this forever. Again, you should ask my wife. I do it forever. Is he ever going to come out of that room down there? No, he's having too much fun. So what I just did was kind of what I did before. I repeated the phrase mechanically. This time all I did was I option dragged the 4 measures over so I could create it again. And because I know that I'm going to run out of time eventually, I'm not going to continue and do the contrasting phrase. You'll just have to imagine that. And so now, you say, what is he doing now? He's making noise. That's interesting. And it's not making any sound.
Add some volume.
Yeah, this is a different sound though. I don't want to do it with that. Well, I guess I'm going to have to, which means I'm going to have to choose a different sound. Organ. It's just because it stopped there. It was really not a choice of mine. And so next thing I'm going to do is see if I can get this to come into the computer. I'm going to click on an audio track, and I'm going to click on the record button. And you see what it says? It says toss. That's the name of my file. It knows I'm going to toss this away. It's been through this many times with me. So, if you look at the screen, I'll move the cursor over here. Over here, if I play, you'll see it's kind of like a meter like you might have on a tape recorder for level, because this is actually audio coming in here. Actually, there we go. More like a guitar sound. We'll try that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take the guitar sound that's coming out of the guitar into the computer and record it. So this could be any sound. It could be my voice, except nobody wants to hear me sing, or anything that could be captured with a microphone. But I'm going to do it with my guitar. It's going to give me a 4-bar con-off, and I'm just going to play a melody part. Verdi's rolling over in his grave. And now I can mix it and do all sorts of things to it. So this is a tool that we use quite a lot, and I'm going to turn the volume off. In the production of music, kind of peeling off the layers of our bags of tricks. So I'm not going to save this because I'm going to toss it just as it knows I'm going to. And then we have all sorts of new hardware. I'm getting close. Okay. I saw it coming. This is a box called the DJX from Yamaha. Mike Bates here? Mike? Hey, Mike. As you know, Mike Bates and Yamaha have been nice throughout the years and providing the pianos and such. Mike obviously was having a conversation with Richard, who told him I was doing this music. Mike called me up and said, "We've got this great, cool box. If I send you one, will you use it to make music with?" And so I said, "Of course." And now it's a great thing. This is not something that you want to see me doing in public, but what I did was I took one of those versions that I did in that sequencer and I dumped it into this box. And this box allows us to do things kind of at a really macro level with form and design, because what I can do is change the form just by pressing a button. So here's the A section. If you listen really carefully. Or the B section. And I can scratch, right? Here we go.
Respect is due. Peace.
And I can do DSP with it.
Peace.
It's not my forte. The great thing is that Mike and Yamaha have brought a dozen of these to be given away as drawing prizes so that you can do this in your bedroom. And if I can just finish up with the last thing we did is for the exit music. Now, with Aida, I had a lot to work with because I had melody and harmony and form, and I could play with different styles. With the exit music, basically, I just had rhythm because, as you'll remember, what we mostly walk out to is the taiko drumming. You remember just walking out to the original piece, and this is just so you remember it. And of course, we're not hearing it because we need to do this really quickly. And hopefully that will make it work. Yes. And so what I did with this was I sought out little pieces of it that looked different to me. So I used this visual editor, and I would say, okay, that looks different. What is that like? And I would just select that, and I would find different pieces of it. And so what I did then was I marked up the entire piece, as you can see, with lots of different regions that I found were interesting. Then I did what's called a playlist. And then what I can do is just choose one of these. For instance, I'm going to start with loop 19, which is right here. I'll just play it for you. What I can do is I can drag that into this window, and it'll play that. And again, using form, I'm going to play it again. And then I'm going to take a different one. I'm going to take this one and drag it in. And then I'm going to take a different one and drag it in. And finally, choose another one. And basically what I'm doing is I'm taking actual parts of the performance from this recording and rearranging them to make a new composition out of the sound. And then I can play it back in this new order. Here's the second loop. Here comes the next part. And here comes the next part. So I can recreate the sound, and there it ended. Thank you. Of course, what I actually did was to make a longer piece out of it that has a new kind of form, and then this was the original music was the Wind and Wave of the Kinku Bay, and then. I created a new remix from this playlist, which is what we're going to listen to when we walk out this time. And then after that, I took that remix into my sequencer, like I showed you here, and then I added a new part to it each time, kind of as a homage to kind of minimalist music like the Phil Glass music that we're going to hear next. With each time we walk out, a new part being added, and each part that is added changes it just slightly, so you have to listen very carefully. The final version brings a surprise, so you have to stay to the end. It's important to stay to the end of this conference. And I hope that you listen actively to all the music that we've created, and hopefully you got something out of what we do with technology and the design of music. And thank you.
Now, before there was the MIDI, and he said came about in 1983. Those of you who are here in 1984 for the first TED conference saw and heard Herbie Hancock, a year after the MIDI first came out, spend 2 hours here one evening, compose a piece of music on the MIDI, just a year after it came out. But before there was a MIDI and a Moog and a this and a that, there was this strange instrument. This is the first, I believe, of all the electronic instruments. And Pamela Kirsten is probably one of the very few people that still play it. It was invented by a man in Russia, if I believe. There was a whole either Discovery Channel or A&E documentary on the invention of this instrument. And she is one of the most astute players of this instrument in the world, Pamela Kirsten.